basically says, all for one, one for all. We're not going to snitch on each other. Our interests are aligned. We want the politics in our case. We want to be represented as political people, and we want to work together as a group to form our defense and present it to the court and whatnot. So regardless of what ends up happening, if any of you end up with lawyers and you want group representation, you can mention that Lauren's got a nice template that she's willing to share with anyone. And then everybody signs it, and that's what makes it lawful. So this fun thing here is a flow chart of what happens to you when you go to court. I'm going to walk through it really quickly. So up at the top in the bright pink, it says warning. That's what I was talking about, where we're going to use the scenario of a trespass, because that's probably the most common offense that activists may face. So the police are going to say, you are trespassing, leave or be arrested. And at that point, you've got a choice to stay and face arrest, or leave and get out of there and have no problems. If you choose to stay and you are arrested, the police will ask you for your information. You can either give them your name, date of birth, or address, or not. If you give them your info, there is a chance that they could give you a ticket and send you on your way. If you don't give them your identifying information, they will definitely take you to jail for at least the purposes of identifying you. Once you go to jail, you will deal with the booking desk. They will ask you a bunch of information, including your employment and where you live and who lives with you and all sorts of things like that. You don't have to give any of that information, though they can use it in determining whether or not they're going to release you or not. In order to release you, they're supposed to make sure that you're not going to break the law again and that you're going to show up for court. Basically, that you're not a threat to the community and that you're going to come to court. And so some of those questions on those booking forms have to do with those issues. If you give them your information, they can release you. It's called release on your own recognizance. You can ask for it yourself. You don't have to wait for them to do it for you. It's also called OR, if you want to talk the lingo. If you are going to be released, they're going to ask you to sign a release agreement. If you sign it, you'll be let out until your next court date. If you don't sign it, you're going to be in custody until you go to court, basically. And once you're out, the next thing that will happen is your arraignment. That's a court appearance where you plead not guilty, they tell you what you're officially being charged with, and they give you a next court date. You can get a lawyer if you want it. From there, the court process kind of unfolds. Your lawyer will get police reports, there might be plea negotiations, you might go to trial. In the outcome of that, whether it's a plea deal or if you go to trial and you're found guilty, the judge is the person who puts up your punishment. The judge has discretion in what your punishment is. But for most misdemeanors that any of y'all will probably face, you're talking about a somewhat modest fine, maybe some road crew or community service, and maybe a year or two of unsupervised probation. That basically means that obey all laws and pay your fines and stuff like that. There are different things that we always try to work when we represent activists. Sometimes people choose to want to go to trial as the political act in and of itself. There are all different things that you can do, but we won't go into abundant detail on that.
If you are there and they say, you're trespassing, and you decide you don't want to be arrested, you start to move away, and you're
just need to put them on notice. So especially if you are cop watching, which means you are videoing an arrest of someone else, we recommend that as you put your camera to your face, you say, I am recording, in a loud enough voice for people to hear it. And now you have just set it into your own recording device, which will later be your evidence that you did so. As long as you say that, it is legal to do any kind of recording in a public space, which is 99.9% of what we'll be dealing with here. If you're cop watching and the police tell you to move back or get away, we suggest that you take little baby steps and slowly move backward until it seems like you are okay. If you stay in a space that they tell you you're not allowed to be in, you may very well get arrested for interfering with a police officer. Resisting arrest is when you intentionally try to stop a police officer from making an arrest, either yours or someone else's. Passive resistance, meaning going limp, is never considered resisting arrest. Running away, doing this so that they can't put your arms behind your back, laying on your front and tucking your arms underneath you so that they can't get your arms. All of those things are considered resisting arrest. I even had a case where the police alleged that my client, who was jumped while cop watching and was not expecting to be tackled by the police, tightened his arm muscles as he was being tackled, and they charged him with resisting arrest. He didn't get convicted of it, of course, but he got charged with it nonetheless. Harassment. If you subject another person to offensive physical contact. So, if you push a police officer, if you shove the sanitation department people, anything like that, that can potentially be harassment, including spitting, spraying people with water, potentially, all of those things could be harassment. Okay, assault on a police officer, probably don't need to go into too much detail about that, that's fairly common sense, but attempting to injure a police officer could also be assault on a police officer. That's pretty serious. Assault on a police officer is a felony. We don't want anybody getting those. Attempt to assault a police officer is a misdemeanor, but it's still a very serious offense. Offensive littering, including leaving flyers and things, is an infraction in Eugene. Depositing burning material on a roadway also could get you into trouble. I wanted to kind of show you guys what the Eugene Code for Prohibited Camping looks like. This is it. It basically says that if your intention in setting up a campsite or a stove or whatnot is for the purpose of maintaining a temporary place to live, that is prohibited camping. It does not say in here that occupying a space for symbolic First Amendment purposes is camping. So we have an argument to be made that if an occupation is for a symbolic First Amendment purpose and not for the purpose of all of us setting up a temporary place to live, which most of us probably have a fine place to live, then we may not be engaged in prohibited camping. And again, that doesn't mean that they won't trespass every one of us if we remain after a lawful order, but I wanted to kind of show you that this is our law. This is the law that most people have been curious about. If you try to hide evidence or hide a human, or a common thing is the cops are coming after one person and everybody kind of tries to block the police from getting at that person, that could be hindering prosecution. Obstructing government administration is another weird crime that they like to throw things. If you intentionally impair the administration of the government, which could be blocking access to courthouses as well as potentially assisting someone in getting away from the cops, that can be obstructing. Folks that might be thinking about flyering or doing some street relabeling of things and stuff of that nature. There is a Eugene code that makes it a violation for affixing, displaying, painting, etc. anything to our streets, trees, poles, etc., etc. If they catch you, you can be charged with an infraction. And an infraction means there's no jail, there's no probation. All they can do is fine you. Noise disturbance. So in Eugene, amplifying noise or creating a bunch of noise primarily between the hours of 10 and 6 in the morning can be a noise disturbance. It's a violation, meaning it's a ticket as well. If you have 3 or more in a year, you can get into a little more trouble. But technically, you are supposed to have a permit for those things. And even, radio, drums, and other musical instruments can be considered a noise violation between 10 and 7 especially. But again, we're balancing that with our First Amendment right to express ourselves in the mode that we want. There are some exemptions to the noise thing. Basically, they really want you to get permits for everything. And I don't know if you guys have heard, but kind of our mantra in terms of permits for Occupy Eugene is the only permit we need is the Bill of Rights. If anybody asks you about permits, your response could be, well, we've got the Bill of Rights, and that seems to be all the permit we need. I also just wanted to kind of briefly touch on this downtown exclusion zone. I don't know how many of you guys have heard it, but the cops basically are trying to run riffraff and low-income people and economically disenfranchised individuals out of our downtown core. Personally, I think it's an issue that Occupy Eugene could really take on and possibly make some local real change on. I hate this law. We actually challenged it in Eugene Municipal Court and won, and then they changed the law slightly and are now reinforcing it again. So it seems that the consumer powers that be want a safe and pleasant shopping experience for everyone, which obviously ties into the work that we're doing. But the reason I put it up there is if you are charged with trespassing within this downtown zone, they can potentially trespass you from that zone for up to a year. If that happens to anyone, contact the CLDC because we're ready and willing to do some test case work here. And we think this is really unconstitutional. But for those of you that might work in the downtown or have reason to go in the downtown and you're worried that this might be a life-messing situation, there are exemptions for work and medical appointments and things like that. So even if you have those issues on board, don't be too feared with them.
Only if you trespass in the exclusion zone, you get excluded from it.
That's right. That's right.